I always feel like there should be some sort of introductory music or something at this point while everyone's waiting for people to log on and join in.
I like that.
It's like, you know, when you're sitting in a lift with a load of people that you don't know.
Right, brilliant. I will probably look at starting soon because my introduction will be a little bit. Right, should we kick off? So, Catherine, if you could just press record for me, that would be wonderful.
Already done.
Thank you. So hi everyone and welcome to our first LoveBrum Learning webinar, Top Tips for Boosting Your Employability After COVID. My name is Holly and I am the Fundraising and Membership Exec here at LoveBrum, and co-hosting with me today is Causes and Executive Coordinator Catherine. Before we jump into the event, this is the first of our LoveBrum Learning series where we hope to cover an array of different topics across the year to support the people and communities of Birmingham. So please do look out for more webinars and events in the future. Now on to introductions. Panelists, could you please introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from and what you do, starting off with Becky, please.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rebecca Simkis and I have 17 years of recruitment experience, the last 8.5 of which have been also as co-founder and managing director of Simkis Guy Recruitment. So we are an office support and entry-level role graduate recruitment specialist, and it's also my great pleasure to be vice chair of LoveBrum.
Brilliant, thank you. And then next to Laurence.
Hi, my name is Laurence Sutton. I'm a retired senior civil servant and I'm currently an executive coach. I've been an executive coach and career coach, performance coach for the last 14 years. And I'm really delighted to be here today to share any pearls of wisdom I might have with you.
Brilliant, thank you. And Andrea.
Good afternoon, everyone. Andrea Hill from the Inspirational Learning Group. We are the UK's #1 provider of enterprise challenges in schools. If you don't know what that is, picture TV shows like The Apprentice and Dragon's Den, and we deliver that kind of training and those sort of challenges to primary and secondary schools. My job as Business Development Manager, clues in the title, I develop business by working with job seekers, school pupils and employers, and that's me.
Brilliant, thank you. And Anne next, please.
Hello, I'm Anne Powell. I currently am one of the managers of SmartWorks Birmingham. We are a women's charity supporting ladies before their interview by offering them interview outfits and coaching before that. I have 30 years experience of recruiting, both as an operations manager, in recruitment and in HR.
Brilliant, thank you. And Christy, you're next. Christy?
Yeah, sorry, just frozen for a second. Hi, I'm Christy Acton from Standing Tall. We're an organisation who match individuals experiencing homelessness into stable jobs in Birmingham. So really keen to participate in this webinar and participate in the conversation.
Fantastic, thank you. And finally, Serena.
Hello, my name is Serena Sale. I'm the Employment and Skills Manager for a charity called Colbridge Trust. The trust has been going for, 25 plus years. I've actually worked in employment and skills, both private, public and charity for 20 plus years. Qualified careers advisor, and we work with a number of different individuals from 16 all the way through to retirement age, working specifically with vulnerable people as well. People who are unemployed over a very short space of time, up to 10, 20, 30 years unemployment.
Fantastic, brilliant. Thank you very much. So yes, today we will be directing each question to 2 of our panelists because we're quite conscious of time. So I will ask, guys, that if you do have anything to add to the answers that are given today, that we will get a chance at the end to recap. For those watching, if you would like to ask our panelists any questions, then please feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen and we will read them out. I'm now going to pass you on to Catherine, who will be asking the very first question, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Holly. Okay, so the very first question then is where to begin when trying to find your perfect next job. So Andrea, if you'd like to kick us off with that one, please.
Absolutely. I mean, one sentence is not going to cover this subject. I mean, where to begin? First of all, I think you need to think about, as an individual, what do you want to do? What have you done in the past? What skills have you got? And where do you see yourself? Almost, I don't like when people say, what's your 5-year plan or what are your career goals necessarily? Because it's hard to think about where you're going going to be in 5 years from now. For example, I work in further education and have done so for 10 years. That wasn't my plan when I left school. I fell into further education through, you know, various job interviews and working with agencies. So my advice on that subject would be to do some research, find out about the kind of companies that you would like to work for. Then I think tailoring your CV to reflect those kind of roles being suitable to you. So again, pulling on your strengths, make your CV, you know, shiny with those sort of skills. But I think where to begin in this day and age, there are so many options available to you. So for example, my tool in everyday life and work is LinkedIn. So I call it professional Facebook. With your LinkedIn, you can build your own profile, build you know, your own online CV, and have an online presence where you can talk to peers in your industry, or physically apply for jobs that you see advertised on LinkedIn. You can also research the recruiter. You can speak to recruiters directly, particularly on that subject of you know, the kind of roles that you may want to apply for. There are specialist recruiters out there that may specify you know, they only work in rail or retail, for example. So working with those recruiters, they will help you tailor your CV. They will put you forward for job roles that, you know, that are desirable for you, and that are also suitable. Not only that, I think it's worthwhile you doing research into recruitment and training options, because there are options like traineeships that people aren't necessarily aware of, available to 16 to 24-year-olds. There is the new government-funded Kickstart scheme, which I am very passionate about. I absolutely adore it, and that's my primary focus at the moment. The scheme allows you to get work experience, and you're paid for that work experience. If you're in receipt of universal credit, you can work with your job coach, and they will identify vacancies for you that fall under the Kickstart scheme, of which there are thousands. So you may very well find yourself working in an industry that you've never dreamt of working in beforehand, but you might just love it. I think you've got to be flexible. You've got to put yourself out of your comfort zone, and just get out there. So it's CV, LinkedIn, specialist recruiters, and looking at training and, you know, employability options available to you.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Andrea. Becky, have you got anything you'd like to follow up with that?
I mean, to be fair, Andrea's just given an absolute massively brilliant overview on everything that you could do. So there's some really wonderful advice there. And Simkis Guy, we have 3 vacancies with the Kickstart scheme at the moment as well. So, you know, there's all kinds of organisations that are there. I think it's a very good point to be really open-minded when you're thinking about what kind of job vacancies and what opportunities you want to work in, and who you want to work for. Think about what you enjoy doing. Don't worry about job titles. So speak to friends and family, find out what they do on a day-to-day basis. It might be something you never would have thought of before that could really be of interest to you. I think online is a really great place to go as well. So absolutely, LinkedIn is a fantastic tool and a resource for you to approach people and find out a bit more about their company and potentially what they do on a day-to-day basis as well. I'd also say that increasingly other avenues such as Twitter, but also Facebook, are being used by companies in order to advertise vacancies and also to give you a bit more of an understanding about what they do. But of course, you know, as the owner of a recruitment company, I have to say that recruiters are your best friend in terms of coming and helping you to find a job. They will be there to give you the career advice, the CV advice, and often will work in partnerships with some of the wonderful organisations that we have represented here today to make sure that as someone who's entering the employment market or feels that you need to be going into the employment market and haven't for a while, that you have all those tools and skills that you need in order to do so.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
So it's for me for the next question. So this one will start off with Laurence. How can candidates make their CV shine?
Well, I think my best advice there in relation to that is, having read and written a lot of CVs in my time, it's really to bring out the inner you in it, to be absolutely self-aware what your unique selling point is and really go to sell yourself. Keep it organisationally specific, keep it job role specific, and really sell your passion and enthusiasm for that job. Now, that's difficult to do if you've not selected a job that you're passionate and enthusiastic about. And I think that's what colleagues have spoken about before, about looking at the most appropriate one and not just wasting your time in splattergunning out to anything and everything just to get a job. You can really focus in on and share that passion and enthusiasm. It shines out if you really determine, you're self-aware about what makes your strength, what are your key strengths, and acknowledge your areas of development and how you want to approach that and consolidate that with the job and role. Those employers are looking for warmth and passion from you, something that they can't train and something that you've got to have personally. And you can make those choices and be intentional about that right from the get-go with your CV.
Brilliant, that's great. And I'll ask the same question to Anne then, please.
Ollie. Okay, so I think with your CV, you have to make sure it's your tool out into the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's your advertisement. So it's a chance you get to make that wonderful first impression. And as much detail as you can put down that is relevant to the job role is obviously very important. But we always say have a master CV and then tailor every CV to the job role that you're going for. It's really important that you can tweak it and pick out what they need to see. And also when you're including it, you put your personal profile, you put down what you've done, what the bits that you really want to shout about. But when it gets to the professional role, instead of just bullet pointing what you've done, what your job role is, you put down some key points, but you also put what you've achieved in that role, because that's so important. But when somebody's flicking through, they can say, okay, this is they increased sales, they developed a team, they managed a team. And that's the bit that really stands out, because it's so easy to fall into that role of repeating a CV, of just picking phrases out of a template and using them over and over again. And you want it to be something that's not too repetitive, but really shouts, this is me and this is what I can do if I join your organisation.
Yeah, fantastic, brilliant, thank you.
That's great. Okay, so next question. Obviously, we all know things have been a little bit different the last year, so we're all having to look towards a new norm, how we're preparing for things, and that sort of ties in with our next question. So, Anne, how can we prepare for, interviews in the new norm? So, online interviews, for example.
Okay, so that's the face of the future, isn't it? We're all going to have to get used to this new way of doing interviews. In exactly the same way as you would for a face-to-face interview, it's preparation. It's knowing what the job role is and knowing before that what parts of that job role you can actually do without needing training. So you run through that automatically develops your confidence. It's knowing about the organisation, it's knowing their ethics, it's knowing what their mission statement is, it's knowing what their values are, because actually when you're there, you want to feel confident, you want to feel that you're as prepared as you can be. In this situation, when we're getting ready, all of us have had to become very comfortable with sitting in front of the camera. It's something that I'm still struggling with, if I'm honest. And the interviewer will recognise that. But you put yourself in the best possible position. You get yourself clothed in exactly the same way as if you were a face-to-face interview. You may be sat at your sofa, you may be sat at your kitchen table, but you dress up exactly the same way as if you're going for an interview. You make sure your lighting works, you make sure your sound and equipment works, you trial it out on a friend. You try to make yourself feel as comfortable as you possibly can, because that is very challenging, I think, for all of us, and something we've all had to adapt to. It's important. I mean, look at me, I'm doing my session today. I've got my notes here. Nobody needs to see them, but they're there as a little comfort blanket, which actually you wouldn't really have in an interview, a face-to-face situation. Mm-hmm. If you, like myself, you're prone to wave your hands about when you talk, it's a lot easier on a camera because you can wave them around under the desk. And I think sometimes actually having a virtual interview is actually far more relaxing than it is in person, because you are in the comfort of your own home. And you can keep all those funny little wavy quirks under control. And hopefully, as we sort of move on, it will become just a matter of course for everybody.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Anne. Christy, have you got anything you'd like to follow up with that then?
Yeah, I mean, I think Anne makes some really good points there, and I think I'd just add, just to reinforce what Anne was saying, is that, you know, any interview, whether it's online or face to face, that there's the whole range of preparation which has to happen on either format. But in terms of online, it is different, obviously a very different experience, and we're all different. You know, our different personalities will react differently to this experience of an online interview. So, you know, in terms of understanding yourself, just kind of reflect on, you know, your own sort of personal situation and how you can prepare as best you can. And Anne's said a really good idea of, you know, just having a practice. You know, a friend or a family member, you can on Zoom set up a half-an-hour interview and just get used to being asked questions on Zoom. You know, in a face-to-face interview, you can read the room slightly. You know, you can see the 3 or 4 people that might be talking to you, and you can sort of read their body language, but that's very difficult online. So you know, eye contact online is, you know, is important, so that you're engaging as best you can. And I think you know, interviewers hopefully will be very understanding of the situation.
Brilliant. Thanks, Christy.
Fabulous. So I'll go on to the next one. So how can we make the best online rapport with the interviewer? And I'll start with Becky.
This is a question that ties in really nicely to some of the points that Christy and Anne have just been talking about, actually. And it's interesting that 18 months ago, such a relatively short time ago, online interviews were very, very rare. You know, it's something that would only happen if significant geographical locations meant that you couldn't do that. And now, increasingly, we're finding that it is actually the norm for face-to-face interviews, certainly at that first interview stage. And I think will continue to be so as well. There are pros and cons. I think that certainly, as Anne and Christy have said, using the tool that you can around you and making yourself feel comfortable and relaxed is probably absolute number one. But I think as well, it's really important to remember that even though you're online, we're all very used to having this slightly strange situation now. So still greeting the person as you would do as if you were in a face-to-face meeting. So once you come into the you know, the Zoom room or the you know, the Teams meeting or wherever, just addressing the person as you would do by saying, you know, thank you so much for meeting me today. I'm really excited by the opportunity of learning more about this. I'm really pleased to have the chance to meet you. This is a position that I'm very keen to explore. So, you know, I'm looking forward to the next hour or so. And immediately by smiling, by speaking clearly and slowly, and then maybe just trying to quash some of those nerves that you might have in that way, will immediately make an impression. If you do have a one-on-one interview situation, then absolutely having eye contact with the person that you're talking to is really important. So I've just used myself as an example to do that. If you have a group interview situation, then making sure that you're addressing the person that you're talking to. So for example, where you are on my screen at the moment, I'm talking to you at the moment, Holly, or Catherine, I'm now addressing you, or Christy, I'm going to be addressing you. So using all of those resources that are available to you are great. What we do find sometimes is feedback we receive is that employers aren't able to get a sense of the person when they're in an online interview, because as you say, you can't see the body language, you can't read the room. And sometimes we find that can be because potentially people are a little bit distracted by the fact that they're talking. And when you're talking to someone in an interview, you don't normally have a little mirror facing you directly, which is showing you exactly what you look like. And it's very difficult to not look at that and think, oh God, what's my hair doing? I need to stop waving my hands around. I look really stupid. All of those fears that we all have can be magnified when you are on an online portal and you have the opportunity of viewing yourself. So just hide your camera, because that way it is just you talking and you have the people in front of you, and that's it. So yeah, I think using those as a way to build rapport would be a really good start.
No, that's really good advice. Laurence, do you have anything to add?
Well, Becky's a very difficult act to follow, so a lot of great stuff there. But for me, it's about being the best version of yourself you can possibly be for that period of time, and to really come over impactfully. And I think what has been, having interviewed at all different levels of the civil service for many years, what we look for is around warmth, how you come over, how you can get that rapport almost immediately, conducting yourself through that interview with warmth. You can actually smile whilst talking about quite serious things. You know, as Becky said, smile and let your warmth come out. Also, your confidence, show that you have self-belief. There's no limiting self-belief. You give an answer which is, you know, from your gut, even if it's something that's not in your strength factor. You know, you evidence that you've got a real interest in development. They're looking to, you know, to get you, and they can't get you unless you get yourself. So you really need to be self-aware. So for that, and for me, it's again about passion. It's about the depth of your feeling about the subject matter you're talking about your experiences before. It's about having those short, sharp elevator pitches that really sell you and give you that element of personality and that element of yourself, something they can't train you in. You can only do that through your own intentionality. So they're looking for your absolute potential to come over and seeing you in the situation that they've got in mind for you. And then just finally, to add to what Becky has said about the motivation and enthusiasm, you know, the depth of your understanding of the organisation and so on and so forth really captures, you know, people will capture that through the warmth and enthusiasm in how you speak. So, you know, they won't always pick up on things. And again, the body language is important. You know, it's about 70% of what we do. Like Anne says, I'm making movements with my hands that you can't see, but, you know, the expression hopefully comes out of my face. So, you know, that's what I would add to Becky's absolutely sound advice.
Brilliant, thank you.
Right, Serena, I'm going to come to you for the next question. So what in your experience are the key differences then between a one-to-one interview and a group interview that you might have to experience, and, you know, again, certainly going through the online process?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that you're under the microscope when you visually see under the microscope when you're on a one-to-one. In a group online, or whether that's face-to-face, employers are actually looking for how you interact with others. And when you're in a group interview, and I've done them myself, both on the end of assessing and actually being assessed, when you're being assessed in a group interview, you forget what's going on, what they're looking for, because you're engrossed in an activity. It's very much directed at you as an individual in a one-to-one. In a group session, they're looking for specific skills: team building, supervisory, team leading skills. Those are the major ones that they're looking for in the differences. With the one-to-one interviews, just to emphasize on something that someone else said, is be yourself. Don't try and be somebody you're not, because an experienced, good profiled interviewer will pick up on it straight away. Don't lie. You can stretch a little bit, but as long as you've got the skill set, you can emphasize it. But do not, and this applies to group sessions as well, do not lie, because, and as I said, an experienced interviewer will pick up on it. But that's it. All I've got to say on that one.
Fantastic, thanks, Serena. Andrea, have you got anything you'd like to add on to that one?
Thinking about the group scenario, I mean, as I've been a recruiter myself, and as I've also been the interviewee in that group situation, I'm always very self-aware, because you're pipping yourself against the other people in that room. You know, ultimately there may only be one job role, and there are 5, 6, 7, 10 people in the room with you. I think, as Serena said, you have to have team building skills. We're assessing as recruiters how you're working with other people on that task. But not only that, you know, are you letting other people speak? Are you polite instead of trying to sell yourself desperately? You know, it's about being polite to your peers and the other people in the room as well. I think that's something to bear in mind. We're all on a level playing field at that point, but ultimately you're trying to sell yourself whilst presenting oneself as well as possible.
I froze then. You on mute at the moment. I froze then, sorry. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andrea. Technology, just goes to show.
Can I just actually, before we move on to the next question, can I just add a couple of points to both what Serena and Andrea said, which is absolutely spot on.
Yeah,
it's really, really difficult in the group scenario situation to know how they want you to come across. So being yourself is absolutely important. It's really important not to be the person who is completely taking over. And it's also equally as important to not be the person who sits and doesn't do anything. So maybe being aware of what your own individual style is. And are you someone who generally likes to lead from the front? That's great. But try and maybe rein some of those skills in a little bit to give other people the opportunity of showcasing their personality as well. And, you know, if you notice that someone isn't participating or being involved, or maybe feels that they're not having the opportunity to talk, be the person who says, oh, such and such, I'm sure you've got a really great opinion on this as well. What are your thoughts? You know, be inclusive in a group situation, and that absolutely helps you to stand out.
Fantastic.
I really like that. Yeah, really good. So next one for me, what are your top tips for the interview process, starting with Christy?
Yeah, a couple of things I wanted to say on this one is that we've talked about being prepared, and I would, you know, just reiterate that the more preparation and thinking you can do about the person's specification and how you can prepare yourselves for the questions in relation to the different person's specifications is putting yourself in the best situation. But then on the day, you don't want to go in so prepared that you respond in a very sort of matter-of-fact way. You've done the preparation in the lead up the week before, and on the day it's about you being yourself, like we've been saying. So it's the preparation enables you to feel comfortable when you answer the questions. Another one I'd say, I'd be interested to hear other panelists' views on this, if it's not relevant for some sectors, but I've always learned that when you're asked a specific question, I try and give a concrete example. So I try and explain the situation that I found myself in, the action that I personally took, and then what was the result as a result of my action. So whenever they ask, please give some examples of your experience of, you know, working in a team, that's the kind of answer that they usually like. But as I say, be interesting to hear from the other panel members on that. The final thing I'd say is, you know, you can do, so long as you've done your best. You know, you may really want this job that you're applying for, but so long as you've done your best, that's all you can do. And it is a two-way process. So you may find out that in the interview that the role is slightly different from what you thought, or the organization has got a slightly different approach. So, you know, you can only prepare as best you can, and, you know, what will be will be.
Brilliant. So I'll jump to Anne again, that same question, but then perhaps afterwards we can open it up to the rest of the panelists. So Anne.
Okay, so everything that Christy's just mentioned, I've got down in my notes, which is good. We're all on the same wavelength. The other thing is, it's not to be too modest. This is your chance to shine, and there's a lot of competition out there. So it's not going in and it's not being boastful. It's being honest. As long as you can back up what you're saying, we've proven results with references when they eventually ask for them. It is your chance to shout about what you can offer to that team, to that organisation. It's no time to be modest, and I can't shout about that enough. It's really, you are the best person equipped to talk about yourself, and it's great to work with recruiters who will lay the groundwork for you, but nobody knows yourself as well as you do. So you should be very bold in your approach and be confident, and that I think is what stands out for in an interview. If you're looking at somebody and they believe what they're saying, you get that in an interview, and it's so important.
I love that, definitely. Anyone else got anything to add on the interview process?
Oh, I think Serena has.
Yeah.
Hand up a few times, sorry. I just want to emphasise what Christy said about interviews, is that there's three kinds of major questions that employers will ask. Closed questions, which are your yes and no answers. Your open questions, which are, well, tell me, I think I want to actually have to top my head, but a competency-based question is the most common question used by employers. And that starts with how, why, when, where, explain or tell me. So, and that's where Christy's STAR method comes in. So that's if you can put some questions together when you're going for an interview of what you think they might ask you. Prime example, tell me about yourself. That's your open question. A competency-based question. Explain a time, Serena, where you've had to use your customer service to deal with a conflict situation. And that's where the STAR method comes into play. So that's what Christy said about explaining what the situation, so the employer can envisage, and my hands are going all over the place, so apologies. You can envisage the situation so the employer can see it. What was the task? What were you doing at the time? What's the action that you've done to resolve that issue? What was the result of it? The result does not necessarily have to be a positive outcome. What the employer's looking for is what skills did you use in that question?
On that subject as well, sorry to interrupt there, I'm just thinking about those candidates that perhaps haven't got any relevant work experience, or perhaps they're school leavers. I think they panic sometimes about having a work relevant employer type example, whereas, you know, you could talk about how you perhaps helped a family member or a neighbour, or how you volunteered. It's not just work related, it can be your personal experience as well. And I think that's a good icebreaker, and it helps you talk about you and brings out your personality. They get to know you a little bit more.
It's a very simple but elegant construct, isn't it, really, that you can get over, even to the level of your passion and enthusiasm, why you did something. Not that you were asked to do it, the fact that you did it off your own bat, and it can really show that motivation.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
No, that's great. Okay, so we're going to move on to thinking about, so you've had the interview. What would your advice be for follow-up etiquette? So, Christy, should we start with you for that one?
Yeah, I'll make a start on this one. I think, you know, obvious thing to say to start with is that the waiting after an interview is, in a lot of ways, the worst bit. You know, you've done really well at the interview. It makes you realise you really want the job, and you're waiting by your phone for days sometimes. And you know, they may tell you in the panel interview that they'll be coming back to the candidates within 48 hours, and 3 or 4 days has passed, and you think, well, I've not got it. But you know, life doesn't work that simply. You know, they may be delayed for some reason, so you have to be so patient. You know, just hang in there. But the other thing I would say is that, you know, some interviewers, employers make a policy of giving feedback, and some in different circumstances can't do that. But I always think that it's really important that you personally try and seek that feedback. You know, you've obviously put a lot of time into your application and preparing for the interview. That feedback is you know, essential for, you know, your next application, and what you can learn from the process.
Fantastic, thanks Christy. Becky, have you got any more advice, obviously from your recruitment background?
Yes, definitely. So for me, I feel that the opportunity to follow up is actually immediately at the end of the interview, while you are there and you have the interviewer in front of you. So one of my biggest pieces of advice that I would say is, and it's a really brave thing to do, but trust me, it will make you stand out in a competitive field, is at the end of the interview, you're generally going to be asked, do you have any questions? At that point, absolutely make sure that you have maybe 2 or 3 questions that you have pre-prepared, and you ask those. If you forget them, because this is always the point when people's mind goes blank, have them written down and have them in your pocket or in a bag, and it's perfectly acceptable to say at that point, do you know, I've got some really good questions for you, but I've had a complete blank moment. Can I just refer to my notes, please? That is absolutely fine. Once you've asked those questions as well, at the end of the interview, do say, I've actually really enjoyed the process of meeting with you today. Thank you so much for your time. I'm really excited by this opportunity, and I hope that I've been able to convey to you some of the skills and some of the experience that I have that I hope will be of interest to you. Whilst I'm here in front of you, is there anything that I can do now to perhaps bring to life more of my experience, or is there any concerns that you have about my application or any of the answers that I've given you? Immediately, it will take the interview by surprise, because you're asking for feedback there and then. You're showing the passion and interest in the opportunity that you are going forward for as well. So saying, can I clarify anything? Is there anything that I've not explained properly to you? Is there anything I can provide you with any more detail? Is a really good way of having some immediate follow-up. Also, then at that point, because hindsight is a wonderful thing, what will always happen in an interview is you will be answering a question from maybe 3 questions go in your head while you're trying to answer the question there and then. So if you have thought about something that you think, I wish I'd have said it, say, actually, do you know what I'd really like to do is, in the question where we talked about my organisational skills or my customer service experience, I didn't get the opportunity of saying to you that this and this happened. So I just really wanted to give you the chance of following up there. Following on from what Christy has said, yeah, it can be a really painful time waiting. Believe me, as a recruiter, we have it all the time. With the best will in the world, people will have every intention of coming back to you in the time scale that they say they're going to, but sometimes work happens, life happens, it doesn't necessarily mean no. What I would say is wait until that time has passed where they've said they're going to come back to you, and ask what that time scale is going to be, whether it will be a couple of days or a week or so. Once you've got to that time scale, then feel free to follow up with sending them an email to say, really enjoyed our meeting once again. I'm conscious that we, in our meeting, you said that there was going to be a follow-up at this point. I just wondered if there are any updates that you would be able to pass over to me at this moment in time. And just asking for updates in that way is a really nice way of saying it, rather than, have I got the job? Have I not got the job? Have you offered the job to somebody else? So doing it in that way is really good. But also then, once the person's come back to you, again, you need to leave it a little bit. You can't then be emailing or calling every couple of hours or even every day or so, because you don't know what's happening within that business. So as much as you need to exercise all of those patient skills, please do so, because sometimes people can let themselves down by unintentionally being a little bit too over enthusiastic. So yeah, quite a long answer, sorry, but something that I have lots of experience in dealing with, and I think that hopefully there's some useful tips there for people to take away.
Fantastic, definitely. Thanks, Becky.
Brilliant. So in an ideal world, you get the job, but obviously in some cases that you don't. How can candidates move forward from a no? And I'll take this one first with Serena.
There's always going to be no's, always, and I think we have to accept that. At the end of the day, there's always one person or more than one person that's got a little bit more in terms of skills or experience that the employer will go for. And I think for me, when I've done actually interviews for actual paid roles, or I've actually done it myself. Sorry about the phone going off from the office. That it's looking at, well, actually, can I change the no? I can't change the no, so move on. You can evaluate, is there anything different that I could have done something in the interview? You have to evaluate in everything, well, you're supposed to evaluate in everything you do. I'll go from this panel today and I think, well, actually, all I did was waffle, so apologies for that. But next time I do it, I will learn from it. So the same with interviews. Is there anything I could have done differently? If so, you can't change it backwards, but you can certainly change it going forwards. And I'm going to use an old phrase here, there's plenty more fish in the sea. There's more than one employer that does one job. It's just that they've just got a slightly different job title. Give yourself a break, guys. There's more than one job out there.
100%, definitely. Same question to Andrea.
Yeah, I think again, Serena covered the majority of what I would have said myself. However, what I would think about is, sometimes you could be absolutely gutted. It's your dream job and you're like, why didn't I get it? I thought I was perfect. So I think getting feedback is really, really important if the employer's got time to do so. Again, like Rebecca said, I think a polite email follow-up is always a good route into having a more in-depth conversation with that potential employer. But not only that, I think it potentially builds a relationship for the future. I've had interviews in the past where I was declined maybe 5 years prior, and then the employer has contacted me via LinkedIn to say, we met years ago, I'd be really interested in talking to you now. No, you'd be a fool to go, well, you didn't want me then, so I'm not coming now. You know, I think every interview, you know, is character building, it's an experience in itself, and you make more contacts, you find out about, you know, another industry or another business. It may be that you go and work in another industry, maybe sales, and you can then sell to that employer. So always be polite, always ask for feedback, and leave the door open, even if it's been closed in terms of that job role.
Brilliant. I love that. Thank you. Yeah, Anne?
Just add to that one. This is a real life situation that we had back in January. An amazing client went through an interview. She didn't get it. She asked for feedback. They said that there was somebody else more experienced for her in the role. They offered that. She had a chat with me. She was very, very upset because she felt she hadn't sold herself well enough in the interview. I advised her to go back to them and say, okay, would you be willing to offer me unpaid work experience for a limited period? She went back, they put that offer to them. They very kindly said, absolutely, you can come to us for 1 month. She went that 1 month unpaid. She did the first 2 weeks. The lady who'd been recruited for the role decided it wasn't the right fit for her. She did 2 weeks, stepped back from the role. My lovely candidate was already in place working for free, so showing she was enthusiastic, and they paid her from the second week on, and she's there now. So it was just a really good chance of getting across how keen she was to do the job, and actually showing them how well she did do the job. So be bold.
Be bold. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Christy, did you have your hand up then? Have you got something you want to add to it?
Just one comment to add is that, and another way of looking at it is that, you know, you may go for your first interview and you're not successful, but, you know, in my experience, sometimes you can have 3 or 5 or 10 interviews, and on your, say, 10th interview, the way you hold yourself in that 10th interview is so completely different from that first interview, that you've taken a couple of bits of learning from the first one and then the second one, and it is part of that process to understand, you know, the interview process, how interviews work, and how you can operate as best as you can in that scenario. That, you know, five interviews later, you then get the job that you're wanting, that, you know, you weren't quite ready for, you know, a few months before, perhaps.
Brilliant. Thanks, Christy. Anyone got anything else to say on that, or are we all done with that one? Laurence, yeah?
Yeah, just building on what everyone has said, a couple of things really. I encourage people to keep a reflective journal on their experiences, because they're all great opportunities and they offer something different, and they accumulate. And as Christy said, by interview 10, they consolidate, or even earlier, and hopefully that achieves success. And another thing that I was going to add, and I can probably say it and others probably can't, is that recruiters are our actual friends, and they take us through this process. And sometimes they soften up some of the feedback that we get. And, you know, clients have really got great feedback from colleagues that have actually got a deeper relationship with the employer and can really give some really good feedback. And again, that can be incorporated into the journal. But I think the overall thing for me is not to take it personally, not to personalize it.
Brilliant. That's great advice. Thanks, Laurence. So we've got one more question for you all. I'm going to pick all of your brains now on this one. So can all of you offer any further advice to candidates that are going through the employment process? And certainly at the moment, as we are starting to come out of lockdown and start to come out of the pandemic. So I'm just going to follow my screen. So Laurence, you're first next to me, so I'm going to come to you first.
Right. Right, okay. I think I've featured it throughout the conversation. A couple of things really about knowing yourself, about being self-aware and heightening your perception of yourself, believing yourself, being resilient, and ability to bounce back after disappointment and learning from those disappointments. And I think what I've done with clients in the past, and there are free online assessments that you can do around your personality, you know, getting to know how you get your energy, what sort of decisions you make and how you make them, and really getting a sense of things that employers don't use in recruitment, but you would use in your personal development journey. And I think, you know, things like the 16 voices, 16 principles and 5 voices and things that are online about personality self-assessment, they're deeply sort of entrenched in academic sort of psychology stuff. But actually some of the feedback that clients have got have been quite useful to them as a starting point to look at making changes and securing their intentionality. It's not about changing your personality. It's about really getting to know who you are, because you can't expect to let other people get you if you don't get yourself. You can often work with a friend that can provide support and, more importantly, challenge. So you can really come to terms with some of those things and put yourself in a stretch position where you can really learn. Another thing that I share from my clients' previous experience is a book on You've Been Called to Interview What Now by Claire Jenkins and Anita Pickardent. It's a really good, simple, straightforward and illustrated book, and it's by 2 fellow Brummy coaches. So I would advocate that you have a look at it, go to the library and get it, or buy it on Amazon. It's been really useful to clients. Oh, I can see that Claire Jenkins is online. It just suddenly struck me when I started using it with clients. They've, you know, advocated its use with children, you know, so we were talking about people that were, you know, senior leadership posts, and it's something that I think is very, very useful, and it's got a lot of resources in there that will help you in your learning journey. So that's all from me, really. Thank you.
Thanks, Laurence, that's great. Anne, let's come to you next.
Right. Be proactive about the job searching. If you're looking for a role that you're going to work 25 hours a week, 30 hours a week, put that same amount of time into looking for work. So if you're going to work 25 hours a week, spend 25 hours a week looking for work, and set yourself a plan, set yourself a daily plan and set yourself a weekly plan, saying exactly what you're going to do, who you're going to approach, how you're going to approach them, sending off, penciling into your diary, who you're going to contact. Are you going to email them? Is it going to be cold calling? What you're going to do, and then check it at the end of the day. And what you haven't got done on a Monday, you carry over to a Tuesday, but you make sure that you are really investing that time into getting yourself work. There's a lot of support out there to people, but you need to be putting the time and energy in for yourself. And it's that simple.
Fantastic, thanks, Anne. Serena, let's come to you next.
Use local providers and organisations for support. They're there, they're out there, they've got information on social media. You can phone them up, you can go in and speak to them, you can have Zoom calls, whichever's better for you. Talk to family and friends for vacancies and support. Ask them to be candid and truthful with you. Is there anything I'm missing? Is there anything on my body language or my tone of voice, or what I'm saying that might be misunderstood? Be communication, organised, follow up. That's in order for me. And one last thing from me, if you believe in you, other people will believe in you. You have to believe in you first.
Definitely, that's great. Thanks, Serena. Christy.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, securing a job at any time is a difficult challenge. Securing a job at the moment in the last 12 months is horrendously difficult, because we're in an environment where things are changing in all directions all of the time. So when you're, in terms of where you're looking for a job, I'd advise to try and keep your options open. You know, the situation as it stands right now, you know, we know that sort of hospitality is sort of opening up to some degree. Construction has been sort of ticking over. You know, some sectors have been decimated, some sectors have grown. So when you're deciding about, you know, the areas of work you're interested in and the job roles, make sure you're taking account of the situation at the moment. You know, if you really want to get a job in an area that's very competitive, you know, keep trying. But there may be, you know, you may have other options to look at other areas in the meantime. and it may be that in a year or two's time, the situation may be different. So I'd really encourage you to take notice of the environment that we're in at the moment.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Christy. Andrea?
Oh, I've got a few things to say. First of all, as I mentioned earlier on, LinkedIn is just the best tool ever. Please, if you haven't got one already, set up a LinkedIn profile, spend time building your network, look at other people's profiles if you're unsure. You know, when I started my LinkedIn about 10 years ago, it took me ages to get around to now. I've got about 7,500 followers. And of those followers, I've probably worked with 80% of them, whether it be in a professional capacity, whether I've met them at careers fairs. On that subject of social media and careers fairs, keep your social media private or very clean. Don't share anything that you wouldn't share with your grandmother. You never know who's going to look you up, and it's very easy to find out anything online these days. So be very careful with your social media. I like a meme as good as the next person, as much as the next person, but at the same time, be careful with how you use them. As I mentioned, careers fairs, look at what's in your local area. Now we're coming out of the pandemic, let's hope. There will be opportunities for you to go out and mingle and look at what local employers have got on offer. And I would be tenacious, keep applying, keep going, something will drop. And occasionally, as we mentioned earlier on, if you're declined or, you know, an employer tells you no, they may come back to you. Not only that, for me, I've had employers that have created job roles for me that didn't exist just because they liked me. That could be you. And that's yeah, my top tips.
That's great. Thanks, Andrea. And Becky?
Oh gosh, how do I follow all of that? There's some absolutely amazing advice that my fellow panelists have given there. So thank you very much, everybody. Just to really add my little 2 pence worth into it, and I could actually talk for the whole hour on this particular subject itself. You can do whatever it is that you want to do. Never let yourself be defined by what other people think of you. Every experience is a good experience, and learn as much as you can. Try not to take things personally, and be open to opportunities. That would be, you know, the all over encompassing piece of advice that I would want to give to anybody who's entering the employment market. To give some personal experience from that, back in 2004, when I had my very, very first job for recruitment, I had my 3rd interview with the managing director, and he told me I was never going to have a successful career in recruitment. So 17 years later, I know it still annoys him, the fact that I do have a successful career in recruitment, and it's a good job that I didn't listen to that person. But it would have been very easy to walk away from that situation and think, actually, well, it's not going to be for me, and I never would have applied for any other roles in recruitment, and I wouldn't be sat here today in front of all of you lovely people. I would also say that embrace every opportunity and be open-minded. If you want to do work experiences, and suggested, you never know where that may take you. The amount of times I've known candidates who've gone in and offered and done work experience and then been offered permanent appointments after that, showing what they can do, it's countless times in the last 17, 18 years. Also, don't worry about job titles. Think about what kind of job you will enjoy doing. It doesn't matter what kind of industry it is in potentially. Think about the kind of teams that you want to work in. What's your working style? Do you like a job where everything's going to be changing from one moment to another? Or do you like to go in at the start of the day, know exactly what you're going to achieve, and have that very satisfying feeling of crossing everything off your to-do list? Or are you somewhere in between? And then think about roles that potentially might mirror those characteristics that you have. And then something that Anne mentioned at the start of the webinar was talking about having a master copy of your CV and tailoring your CV. That is, without doubt, probably my #1 piece of advice. The amount of CVs that we see on a daily basis, and this could be from everything from an entry-level role up to, honestly, senior management roles where salaries are into the 6 figures. You can see immediately when somebody hasn't put any time, care or attention into making the application. And a top tip for you, generally you have between 3 and 6 seconds to grab someone's attention with your CV. So you immediately need to put in front of them what they need to see and make it very clear. So as much as it takes time, it is better to make far fewer applications, but really tailor those applications to mirror some of the language that maybe the company talks about on their website or is in the job specification, and really making sure that you're addressing those key points that they're looking for, even if it's just rearranging the bullet points, so that if you're applying for a customer service role and that was part of what you did previously, but it wasn't the main part of your role, move it straight up to the top, because immediately then the person reviewing it will be able to see your relevant experience straight away. So I will leave it at that. Something I'm very passionate about. So as I said, I could talk for hours on it myself. But yeah, I think all of the panelists have given some really, really amazing advice there. So hopefully people watching have gained some interesting and useful top tips.
Definitely. Thank you very much, guys. That was definitely some amazing tips thrown in there, and some things that I probably hadn't even thought about myself as well. So
Yes.
Still learning, which is always good. Thank you so much. You've all brought your own relevant experience. You've all given us really great experiences, real life stories as well, which I think is important. You know, it's important to show that just because you're not there yet doesn't mean you won't get there. And I think that's something that, you know, needs to be taken away from today. So thank you. You've all echoed that one way or the other. So thank you for that. Those of you who are joining us, hopefully you have managed to take some expert tips and some knowledge away with you about that. As Holly mentioned at the beginning, we will be doing some more LoveBrum learning webinars, so keep your eyes peeled for those. They will be coming up soon. And thank you, all of you, really, for all of your support to LoveBrum. You know, we couldn't do what we do without having you guys on board support us, and having, you know, people participate and joining with things like this. So do head over to our website, lovebrum.org.uk, for a little further look on what we're up to. And, you know, apart from that, take care, everyone. Stay safe, and hopefully we will see you all soon.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys.
Bye.
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 See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.